As someone who grew up playing games on the original PlayStation, I've always wondered why games that use retro art styles often limit themselves to pixel art and rarely delve into the blocky visual stylings of the 90s. Never Stop Sneakin is one of the few games I can think of that actually utilizes this polygonal art style, but is its nostalgia-fueled style enough to make the game worth checking out? Let's take a look. At its core, Never Stop Sneakin is a simple parody of what some would call the epitome of classic PlayStation games, Metal Gear Solid. It puts you in the role of an agent of the Department of Sneakin, tasked with foiling the evil plot of Amadeus Guildenstern, a time-traveling madman who has kidnapped all of the US presidents from throughout history.
Even the bad ones.
The game's simple yet absurd premise is full of silly humor and gags that riff on various elements of classic Metal Gear tropes, from impromptu history lessons complete with stock footage, to the use of long-winded, convoluted explanations that are thankfully lampshaded and avoided. The game even features a cast of ridiculous bosses to fight, though for every clever reference the game includes, it feels like there were hundreds that were left out. Never Stop Sneakin is still good for a chuckle or two, but when you're parodying a game like Metal Gear Solid, it's not like you don't have endless ammunition for your jokes. Beyond the clearly MGS-inspired premise and ridiculous characters, Never Stop Sneakin also lifts the classic PlayStation game's polygonal art style and mimics its unforgettable sound effects and music, and to be honest, it works really well. The blocky models feature just enough detail to avoid being boring, and while they're intentionally lo-fi, they never appear ugly. The blocky characters are brought to life by over-the-top performances, which help to make the cutscenes the best moments of the game. It just makes me wish that the game's text-based, codec-style conversations were fully voiced as well. Without that little extra detail, I found myself skipping over the conversations more and more as the game progressed. As the game does progress, you'll encounter a number of different environments, and while they're somewhat varied, there's nothing particularly special about any of them. They're full of basic features such as computers, jeeps, and lockers, all viewed from a top-down perspective, and whether you're skulking through caverns, snowy bases, or high-tech helicarriers, nothing really changes. The one exception to this is the jungle stage, in which weather effects, specifically lightning, manage to make it difficult to see enemy vision cones. Speaking of vision cones, Never Stop Sneakin is what you get when you take the mechanics of the original Metal Gear Solid and distill it down to its most simple form. You have to sneak to the end of each level while avoiding or eliminating guards, turrets, and cameras along the way. The catch is that you can play this game entirely by using just the left analog stick, or the Switch's touchscreen if you're feeling weird. Other actions such as takedowns or hacking computers occur automatically if you're in the right situation, making this easily the most simple stealth game I've ever played. Taking down guards occurs by moving into them as long as you're out of their direct line of sight. If you happen to be spotted, you'll automatically shoot the guard who saw too much. If you're lacking ammunition, you'll drop a stun grenade to confuse your enemies. Failing all of that, guards will shoot you until they lose you, or you die. Players have similar means of dealing with cameras and turrets as well, and to be honest, it creates a quick and simple gameplay loop that is surprisingly satisfying. To top it off, every so often you get to fight a quirky boss with their own unique gimmick, not entirely dissimilar to those found in MGS, though nowhere near as memorable. The problem is that, with the small handful of bosses on offer and the lack of evolution to be found in the game mechanics themselves, Never Stop Sneakin gets old really fast. It doesn't matter how satisfying that core gameplay loop is, the game just doesn't feel designed to last as long as it does, yet it requires more time than your average Call of Duty campaign to complete. The game does manage to feel rewarding by providing you with a steady stream of currency, unlockable characters, and weapons along the way, but it's just so boring. To the game's credit, it does try to spice things up with a regular flow of perks to enhance the experience, but these rarely add any depth to the proceedings. More often than not, it just makes the game easier, which isn't really what it needs. On paper, Never Stop Sneakin is a dream game for me. A top-down stealth game that parodies one of my all-time favorites, using a retro art style that you just don't see very often, sounds really awesome. Unfortunately, the game comes off as a cheap knockoff Metal Gear Solid mobile game, which is super fun to pick up and play for like 20 minutes, and then forget about for the rest of your life. The core gameplay is fast and satisfying, and the occasional jab at the seminal stealth game that inspired it are worth a chuckle, but the mechanics just aren't that interesting past the first half hour. And the game's best moments, its cutscenes, feel so few and far between that they're hardly worth making the effort to see. All I can say is I wish I'd stopped sneaking much earlier than I did. Never Stop Sneakin gets the Top Hat Gamer rating of bad.